Hey everybody, this is World War Guy here today, and today I kind of want to talk about bayonets. Now, before I begin, I know there's videos out there about bayonets, the use of them, the history of them, the variety of them, etc. I know that, but I just thought it'd be fun to do, my own version of it. And the whole idea in the video, as you can tell by the title, is bayonets. What are they, and what were they used for? Like, why attach a long, pointy thing to the end of your rifle? Now, really, it dates back to really the primitive rifles, the first rifles coming about, being issued in mass quantities to the armies. Rifles back then, and of course, I am not an expert in older rifles, black powder rifles, so much. So any mistakes I will say, I do apologize for anyone who does know more than me. But old rifles back then, things we see in the 1700s, 1600s, all the way up to the mid 1800s as well, or I guess the late 1800s. A lot of these rifles took a long time to reload. They were muzzle loaders, so you'd have to load your projectile from the muzzle. Some of them, I think you'd put powder down here. Again, I'm not an expert, but it would take a very long time to reload your rifle. And within 1 minute, I think in like the Civil War, for example, the rifles they were using then, it would take an expert shooter could shoot and reload about five times within the minute. Again, that could be wrong, but we still get the idea that that's not very much. In 1 minute, 60 seconds, only 5 rounds. So it's very slow. So the whole idea of the bayonet is basically as a last line of defense. You shoot as long as you can, and then once you're starting to get overrun or too close to carefully reload in time, the bayonet is put to use and basically become a sort of melee force. Of course, when rifles were now given to every soldier in the military, unless of course artillery, cavalry, etc., they'd be line infantry. So they'd all stand in a line, shoulder to shoulder, and they'd march in ranks, and they'd all shoot at once. The majority of time, that was at least in doctrine. They'd all shoot at once, create a volley fire that would hit the enemy and hopefully stop them, kill a bunch of them, wound, and etc. And then they take the time to reload. And oftentimes they develop different lines. So you have a standing line and then a crouching line in front. Sometimes it'd be spread a little bit apart. Sometimes you could have 3 lines. There's more in detail to go into that I just don't know. But this would kind of create a constant volley fire. You have bang while you're reloading, the guys in front of you, behind you, bang, etc. And this does, increase the number of rounds being shot at the enemy. But of course, at one point the enemy is going to get closer, and that's when you got to use your bayonet. So the whole idea of the bayonet is this sort of last line of defense to protect yourself and to kill the enemy, because it was too slow to reload your rifle effectively that eventually you would have to use your bayonet to defend yourself appropriately. Now, why were they still used in modern warfare such as World War I and even World War II? In World War I, they still had the idea of a line infantry. Although they did have these nice firearms, either they were single shot, but they were I guess breech loaders. But you just toss in a casing, load it, and shoot. It's a lot quicker. Then you do have bolt action rifles like this, which it could hold 3 to 6 rounds. You shoot, you cock, you shoot, you cock, you shoot, you cock until you're out. Reload. Although they did have these better rifles, they were still in the mindset of line infantry. You'd be in the line, you'd shoot you reload, etc. That's why you see a lot of early wars with the magazine cutoff, where you load your 5, 6, whatever rounds, and then there's a cutoff that even though you work the bolt, nothing's going to get picked up, and you load in individual rounds. This is the whole idea. They were still expecting line infantry. They shoot, reload, shoot, reload, shoot, reload. So the idea was still that at one point they're going to need bayonets for this close quarter fighting, when the line infantry finally met face to face, very close, and they would have to fight each other. So that was really the main idea of the development of the bayonet. Now, the reason why they're still seen in late World War I and World War II is they're still being used. In World War I, although you had these very long rifles with even longer, not even longer, but you had very long bayonets attached to it. They're very hard to use in the trenches. They shortened the rifles and shortened the bayonets, but they were still being used. In the trenches, there were still instances when bayonet fighting was still used. Was it the best fighting method, hand-to-hand fighting method? No, not necessarily, because again, you get a long rifle with a long bayonet. It's just not very simple. But it was still used, so of course it was still issued after World War One. You had the militaries in World War II all issued bayonets. For example, we have a Russian Mosin-Nagant bayonet here. We have a Japanese Arisaka bayonet. So all armies issued bayonets because they're still in the mindset that soldiers would fight hand-to-hand combat and they would need a sharp blade. Now, of course, the rifle is great because you can stick the bayonet onto it and stab them from a distance. You don't really have to get so close to them as if you just had a knife or club or whatever. So that's really the whole idea. Now, of course, after World War II, as modern warfare was progressing even more, it was soon realized that bayonet fighting wasn't going to be as necessary, especially with the development of semi-automatic firearms. So instead of bolt action every time you shoot, you have to cock the piece. You pull the trigger every time and it shoots. Or fully automatic firearms, where you just hold down the trigger and it shoots. Of course, reloading was also a lot quicker. So you run out of ammo, you can just pop another mag, clip, cartridge, whatever, and you're back to shooting. It just takes a couple of seconds. So soon bayonets were, phased out, or at least not very important. They were, still issued to the point that even today, as far as I'm aware, most militaries don't issue bayonets. Again, I could be wrong. I'm not entirely sure with the modern military. But that's really why bayonets aren't used anymore, is because you can quickly reload your firearm, in a shorter amount of time, and you pack a lot more heat in that firearm. Many magazines can hold 10, 20, 30 rounds. So there's not really a need for a bayonet because the chance of you getting into a hand-to-hand combat is just not going to happen. Now, of course, there's also, military doctrine where that has evolved, where we're not expected to fight in a line formation. Militaries try to avoid this sort of massive hand-to-hand combat where, it's all everyone for themselves using whatever weapons. And that's just going into the whole military doctrine now and tactics they use now that I won't get into. But that's pretty much the idea of bayonets. Now, instead of just ending the video here, I do want to show some examples. So we do have the ones here, the Arisaka bayonet here, and the Mosin-Nagant Russian bayonet here. And then here's what they look like on rifles. So here we have the Steyr M9530. This is the carbine, so it's short, but they still even made bayonets for it. And I hope you can see it. You can see the bayonet there. This adds about 10 inches to the rifle. So whatever length of the rifle you have here, you now have an extra 10 inches that you can use to reach someone in front of you. Here's a Belgian Mauser rifle. Hopefully you can see all of that. And this is the bayonet used. I don't know how much you can see, but this is about 17 inches in front of the rifle. As you can tell, you have this. I don't know if I'll be able to demonstrate. I can poke someone from quite a distance. So really the idea of bayonets, to sum it up, is because of the old rifles where it took a longer time to reload, and the way military doctrine was, at the end of the day, soldiers had a very high chance of doing hand-to-hand combat, where the bayonet was useful because they could stab someone from farther away, keeping themselves out of harm's reach. Now, of course, later on, as firearms improved, military doctrine changed, bayonets started being phased out because they weren't seen as being necessary. They're, at this point, becoming a waste of money, waste of resources, etc. Although they're really cool, they're really fun to put on a rifle and see how long it is. Some rifles, they become taller than you when the bayonet's attached, so it's very interesting to see. But that's basically the idea of bayonets. So if you didn't know that, I hope I taught you something. If you did know something, I hope I taught you something. But if you liked the video, please drop a like, write a comment, share, and subscribe. But besides that, you guys have a great day.